Okay, so this was the last and final talk that I went to on day two. And it was with Miss Luisa Oliveira from Bahia, from Salvador. And she gave us, oh, I have it somewhere. She gave us the little bracelets because she's a doll. She's so nice. And just a little bit about Louisa because she's from the BSIG and gotta love our BSIG members. She comes from a corporate background, and so she worked at Ernst and Young for quite a while, and she was a manager, and she's recently transitioned into English language teaching. So we're so excited to have her. And so her talk was about how to use the STAR method to prepare students for a successful job interview. This is one of the things that we constantly have to battle with, especially now. I mean, the job market is rough. So the STAR method is a way to, I like how she put it actually. As she said at some point, I'm summarizing here. These are not her words, but what I wrote down is the STAR method is a way of structuring storytelling for interviews. Now, I actually use a different method, but I could see the similarity. So when I work with my clients with interview things, I like to use PAR. Um, she uses STAR. They're very, very similar and they have the same. Again, it's just trying to structure your storytelling in interviews. So she started off the session with a question that has been used in companies: how to transport 5 elephants in a car safely. And so we had to sit there and think about that. And this is a real interview question, and they come up with some doozies. And so we were trying to think about, well, what would people say? And so some people said put their seatbelts on. Some people said open the doors. I said, well, you could, reinforce the car a little bit or train them to sit properly. Or I thought to myself, maybe they're toy elephants and you can just put them in a bag in the trunk. Who knows? But anyways, so this, stimulated the conversation that, of course, why would a company ever ask that question of a candidate? And it's because they're looking for things like creative thinking and thinking outside of the box and how they react to kind of stressful situations and what they're doing. So she gave an example of real life where there was an interview and there was a candidate that the company was really, really excited about. And he was asked a question, and his response, he was asked this question, and his response was so aggressive and abrasive that the company immediately reversed their idea about it. So he lost his job because of the way that he lost the job opportunity, I should say, because of the way that he answered this. So, poor Louisa, because we were a small group, but we were chatty and we had a lot of opinions. And I think we got, she was trying to keep us on track. But we got a little distracted and there was multiple discussions and I asked her a question. And then, of course, then we went off into a whole nother thing. So let me actually see if I can pull up the slides because I was diligent about taking pictures of the slides. Anyways, okay, so the STAR method, it's an acronym and it stands for situation, task, action, result. So situation, you introduce the situation to set the scene and provide the context. So if somebody asks you a question in a job interview, then you need to kind of set the scene. Here's what was going on. Then T is for task. Describe what your responsibility was in that situation. A is for action. So what action do you take in order to achieve the task? And R was result. So what was the result following your action? I use something very, very similar. It's PAR, which is problem, action, result. But I do like the star. I might have to start changing that to star because the situation is like the general situation and the task is so your responsibility. Again, yeah, I like it. Okay. She gave us some topics that the questions usually cover in a interview, which is teamwork, problem solving, working under pressure, overcoming setbacks, leadership, and communication. Again, I think there's a soccer game going on, so I apologize. So yes, so that's those are kind of like the categories that you can be asked about, and usually that people want to know about these because these are most of them, if not all, soft skills, which are lacking nowadays in the job market. And companies are really having a difficult time, and they're voicing that difficult time of finding people with good soft skills. And she gave us some beginning parts of the sentence, or beginning, sorry, I should say beginning parts of the questions. For example, tell me about a time when, give me an example of, describe a situation, what do you do when, have you ever? So if the question starts like that, then probably you're going to have to use this kind of star, this star idea to to get you through to kind of structure the story. Um, so there's a couple companies that use this. Amazon is one of them, and Airbnb. And from my understanding, it's really a way of so how I should actually let me go back and explain that. So Amazon and Airbnb use this when they structure their questions. So the HR representatives will go through and follow this situation, task, action, result. They'll go through and kind of follow this when they're asking the questions about it, so that it's a standardization of candidate interviews through the STAR method. So the examples that Luisa gave us with Amazon and Airbnb. And somebody else said another one, but I forget what it was. Anyways, so then we started talking and I got distracted and I asked a question, but it was, related. So Luisa was also talking about that so how do we prepare our people to do this? So use the STAR method. It's a good method and it structures your answers. But as teachers, we need to start at business English teachers, we need to start at the job description. So get that job description and use that as like your guide, because in there you're going to find all the information that you need about what the learner needs to produce and what the focus of the company is for that specific function. So she was saying, if you see that the primary function is to write emails in English and business reports, then writing is going to be your focus, and it's not going to be so much using the telephone. Not that that's not important, or listening and things like that, and you need to work on those. But if they have an interview, usually it's like, oh, I have an interview in 2 weeks, please help me. So you've got priorities and we have to prioritize. And one of the ways of prioritizing is looking at the job interview, or excuse me, the job description, and picking out things that are probably going to be likely to be asked about during the job interview. And so then I got her distracted because I asked a question, and my question was, because it's something that I feel and something that I've noticed over the past 11 years. And what I've noticed is that companies, some of them are getting better. I can't say all companies, some of them are getting better, but companies in general will put things like English level fluent. The job description has nothing that the person has to do. None of their responsibilities are functions where they have to communicate in English. So like, why would you need fluent English if the person doesn't need to use it in the job? So I tend to recognize in the market that there's this kind of like, well, we just want fluent candidates. Oh, and Luisa gave a great example that she was dealing with a company of bus drivers, and that they started putting bus drivers in the interior of, I don't remember where, maybe Bahia, but and they started putting for their applicant requirements intermediate English. And their reasoning behind of putting intermediate English for bus drivers in a rural area that doesn't have any tourists or has a very low percentage of tourists, and is a national company, so it doesn't have anything internationally. It doesn't have anything that's going to be crossing borders going into different states. The reason for them to putting intermediate English was because they didn't want to receive 500 applications for one position. There's too many people applying. So it was a way of them reducing the number, filtering through. So this is the issue, right? So companies need to be way more responsible about the levels that they're putting on the mandatory requirements for their job and the job positions or their openings. And at the same time, like as teachers need to be a little bit hyper vigilant about what's really going on there and taking a good analysis of the job description. So I asked her that if if we ever do an analysis on the job description, like, do you find discrepancies between what the job description says and what the requirement of English is? Because I've found that it's been frustrating for me. And so we diverged and went down that track. I was just wondering if it was like something that was isolated to me, or just kind of seeing like what are other people, especially that are so broad and going across Brazil, if this was something that was going outside of São Paulo, for example. And we got into a whole discussion. And I feel very bad, Louise. I'm so sorry. And she didn't get to do her activity that she had planned with us. But the group that was with us was absolutely amazing. And we had a really, really good discussion. And we were sharing a lot. And kind of providing some suggestions to each other. So I was actually quite, I know that her activity was going to be fantastic too. But the discussion was actually just really good, and kudos to Louisa, just knowing like, well, let's just have this discussion because it's obviously important and it's completely valid, and she gave us her materials anyway, so we were able to look at the activity afterwards. So yeah, so really good tips. And one of the best tips that she gave us was that the Amazon website, if you look for like job openings, like the career site, not Amazon where you buy the products, but the career site, the company site, I should say, where I think it's like Amazon.jobs or something like that. I can look it up. Has training for interviews, and they have a whole bunch of materials there that if you're having to prepare your learners for job interviews, especially if you need to do it urgently, there are some training materials that you could very easily adapt to whatever the needs are of your student. So great suggestion there. The star method, of course, is fantastic, and thinking about our responsibility in terms of not just asking questions and training and repeating, but which is extremely important, but doing it in a really focused and concentrated way. So we look at what's the job description look like? What are the key responsibilities? What does this person need to do? And then how can we get them through that job interview, applying the STAR method to really structure their storytelling so it makes sense to the HR person or the manager, whoever is dealing with them at that time. So yeah, it's again just a great job, Louisa, and interesting. And of course, I would like to hear if anybody has a different method. I used PAR, but I think I've been converted to STAR because I kind of like the separation of situation and task, as opposed to problem. And I think it's a little bit clearer. And yeah, so how would you prepare your students for interviews? Do you have any other ideas? We would love to hear. And thank you so much, Louisa, for your great talk. Again, that was how to use the STAR method to prepare students for a successful job interview. Well done.